Normally lament psalms have some type of pullout where they basically say, and yet I will hope in the Lord, and God will come to my rescue, something to that effect, some type of hope. This particular psalm, and there's one other, leave us at this end of desperation with no hope. Go with me to Psalm 44. Psalm 44 ends much the same way. Psalm 44 says this, the last two verses. For our soul is bowed down to the dust, our body clings to the ground. And arise for our help and redeem us for your mercy's sake. So, a slight tinge of hope at the very, literally the last few words maybe, but the rest of this thing is desperation, no hope. And I think it's good to have these psalms in here because I think there are people that we deal with, and even ourselves go through times where we sense that God is just not there, and even though we're crying out to him, he's not answering us, and we're not hearing from him, and we have despair, we have no hope. We sense that there's no hope. And when you have no hope, then you come to that place where you just feel like, well, I just should just lay down and die. And we have people that we pass by all the time that are going through this type of part of life where they sense that God is just not present. And even when they cry out to God, they don't sense that he's answering them or that he's even hearing them. And so you can sense the depression at the end of this lament. And by the way, there's nothing wrong with lament. There's nothing wrong with crying out to God and saying, okay, God, I don't understand what's going on, and this is the way I feel. That I feel like this is just darkness. I feel like there is just despair. I don't feel any hope. I don't see any light coming my way. And to be able to express that and say, okay, God, this is where I'm at. And this particular psalm comes to the very end, and unlike most lament psalms, instead of coming back with some type of hope, some type of belief that God is going to intervene, it just ends with, I'm in darkness. I'm in darkness, and this is where things are. And he doesn't offer any hope at the end of Psalm 88. You barely see a flicker of light at the end of Psalm 44. There are only two psalms like that. But I think they were left in there because I think there are people who, after they've reached out to God, after they have bared their heart and their mind to God, still feel like God has not heard them and God has not responded, and that there is no hope. And I think it's okay to acknowledge that we have those feelings and those emotions, that we all, at some level, have times where we think to ourselves, even if we don't express it, that, okay, God, I'm not sure you're really hearing me. This doesn't look good. And it doesn't, the foreseeable future doesn't look good. It looks like things are headed in negative directions, and I don't see your intervention coming. I don't see you helping me. And these particular lament psalms are there to say to us, it's okay to bear our deepest anguish to God and to say to him, I just don't think you're there, and I'm not even sure you care, because I don't feel you, I don't sense you, I don't hear from you. And God says, I want you to still come to me. The very fact that you're saying this tells me we're still in relationship, we're still talking. We're still talking. And as long as we're still talking, then there is hope. Then there is relationship. And I will take you through even the darkest areas of life, even those times that are extremely dark. I'll still be there. Even when you don't feel, even when you can't feel me, I'm still there. Just talk to me. And this is the psalmist saying, I have those times. I have those times where I just don't sense God's presence. And so it just ends on this real downbeat. I mean, I've likened this psalm to watching an air show, and you watch the air show, and you think to yourself, they're going to go into a dive, and that's part of the show, but they're going to pull out of this thing. They're going to get as close as they can to the ground. They're going to pull out, and instead, what you watch happen is they bury it into the ground. And you stand there and you watch this, and you think to yourself, they just destroyed themselves. We have a lot of people in this world who have no hope. They have despair. So what do? They turn their life over to drugs, to alcohol, to a lot of other things, trying to numb the pain, trying to mask the pain. And instead of turning to God, they try to do everything they can to mask the pain. So I think the beauty of what we have as believers in Yeshua the Messiah is we can say to them, there is hope. But the hope is not in yourself, the hope is not in me, the hope is in Him. That's where the hope lies. And I was just last week, a few hours from this time, almost a week from this time, I was standing in front of an audience at the memorial service for Steve Wolf. And here's a guy who had strong faith all the way to the end. Never wavered in his faith that God was who He was and that God was in his life. And he battled cancer for a little over 2 years at least. Never gave up believing that God could heal him if He wanted to, but it didn't look like that was going to happen. And as things progressed, it became more and more obvious that that wasn't going to happen. And here he was, 56 years of age. And I'm thinking to myself, that seems young now. There was a time when 56 seemed like it was ancient. Now 56 seems like it's very young.
Yes.
And to go through that kind of battle, he had the faith. It wasn't a lack of faith. He never wavered in his belief that God was sovereign and that God was caring and compassionate. So I think we have to come back to ultimately, at the end of all this, we have to come back and say, we have a God who can resurrect. And He has resurrection power so that death does not have the final say. Because if death has the final say, then there is despair, there is no hope. But through the work of Christ, through His resurrection and power of the resurrection, we have hope that there is life beyond what we see here. This is why he says to Martha, do you believe that your brother will be in the resurrection? She says, I believe in the resurrection. I believe in the resurrection. I have that faith. And he says, I'm the resurrection and the life. If you believe in me, then you will be resurrected. I have conquered death. And the worst that this life can offer us, the one thing this life takes from us is our life. And so we end up, all of us, are moving towards death. It's appointed unto man once to die. However, thanks be to God that we have the resurrection that says one day, apart from this existence, there will be resurrection and there will be hope on the other side of this. So that even though we suffer for a while, our suffering it's nothing to be compared to the glory that is coming. That doesn't mean that we don't suffer down here. And that doesn't mean that we deny that there's suffering down here. We don't bury our heads in the sand and say, well, nobody suffers. Because people suffer. And I saw Steve go through an incredible amount of pain towards the end. A lot of pain. And they were doing as much pain management as they could. Different types of drugs, different types of morphine, it's just all kinds of drugs. And he suffered a lot. So I don't want to deny the suffering aspect of things. There is going to be suffering in this life. In the midst of that suffering, we have to try and do as much as we can to turn to our God and say, okay, this is where I am. And in the midst of that suffering, God is still there. In the midst of all that, He is still present. He has not abandoned us in the midst of our hopelessness at times. That's the message, in a sense, of these laments, is to say, they are not. We don't want to deny that there's pain. We don't want to deny that there is this mental anguish that goes on. That we have a dark night at times and sometimes that's not just a dark night, but it's a dark period. Not a denial of that, but a realization that God is present in that pain and present I want to end with this. I said this to Steve. This was probably about a month and a half before he died. I mentioned this at the memorial service. I said to him, sitting in his room, this is in Gig Harbor, I said, why does God always have to take the good people? Why can't he take the nasty people from us? Just take all the nasty people and leave us the good people. And Steve said to me, he said, well, what makes you think I'm one of the good ones? And I said, okay, fair enough. And I said, so then I said to him, well, all right, fine. I said, I'll be one of Job's interlocutors. And I started walking around the room, and we were just there, he and I said, okay, fine, Steve, tell me what your sin or sins are, and we can be done with this. And he said, well, maybe that's not the case either. I said, okay, well, first you say it's not because you're good, and then you say it's not because you're bad. What's the other alternatives? And then he said, well, maybe it's like that situation in John 9 where the Lord says of this man born blind, and he was born blind so that I may receive glory from this. That I'm going to ask you to fill up my suffering so that my glory may be manifested in what I do to you. And then as I was pondering that last Shabbat afternoon, this thought came to me. Because I'm thinking about Job in the opening chapter there. And what if the conversation goes like this? I don't think most of us have pondered this, but what if the conversation goes like this? The evil one comes to the Holy One and says, I'd like to test Job. He says, okay, fine, you can take all his stuff, even his family, from him. So the evil one takes all of his stuff and his family. And Job refuses to curse God. The evil one comes back to the Holy One and says, well, you got this hedge around him. I can't really touch him. So, of course, he's not going to, because it really didn't affect him personally. So, okay, fine, so what you can do, you can touch his body, but you cannot kill him. So the evil one touches Job's body to the point that even Job's wife abandons him, but yet Job does not abandon his God amidst all the suffering. And I said, I got to thinking about this. What if the conversation went like this? Okay, not only do I give you permission to devastate his body, that is to push him to the edge but not over. What if the Holy One says of someone, I not only give you the permission to push them to the edge, I give you the permission to push them over if you want to. If you want to, go ahead and push them over the edge with my permission. I'm okay with that, because I'll still get the glory from that. Go ahead and push them not just to the edge, but push them over the edge. Take their life if that is what you want. I'm okay. I'm giving you the permission to do that. I'll allow you to push them over the edge.
Nobody wants to hear that.
Nobody wants to hear that. Yeah.
Going along with the conversation, a good book read by Lapkin is When Bad Things Happen to Good People. And that's really, you'll find a lot of truth in that.
Yeah. And there's a book by a man named Rabbi Kushner. And Kushner struggled with this concept of the goodness of God versus the power of God. If God is good, why would he allow suffering? Is he not powerful enough to stop it? Or is he so powerful? Is he powerful? Does he have all this power, but at the end of the day, he's really not that good? There's a part of him that's not as good as we think, and that's why he lets this happen. See, this is a common argument amongst those who lack faith, even those who do have faith. But they'll say, well, the truth, so they want to go to the ends of the, let's go to the spectrums. He's good. He really wants to heal you, but he's just powerless to do so. Or he's got all this power to heal you, but the truth is the reason he doesn't do it is because, well, frankly, there's just not enough goodness. The goodness doesn't outweigh the power. So either the power outstrips the goodness or the goodness outstrips the power. Problem is, those are false dichotomies. The truth is this: God has all goodness and God has all power. And the balance of that is that in his sovereign plan, they work together. It's not that when someone dies, that God is powerless to have stopped it. And it's not that because he didn't stop it that he had the power. He had all the power to stop it, but he just didn't care. No compassion, no care, no goodness. No. Those are false dichotomies. Get 1 and 2, then we gotta go.
Yeah, if, God gave us free will, so we have the choices to do the things that we do. God can command us like he does everything else, and then we would be kind of like him. We would have choice. We would, if he would do all these things for us and everything, then he would just be a dictator, and we would just be, puppets. We wouldn't be free. We wouldn't have free will. So you can't put that argument on God because it's not a valid argument because there's free will there, and that accounts for something.
Okay, come back to that. Go ahead. Good.
When I was a little guy, I took numerous trips out to the woodshed.
No.
Frequent trips out to the woodshed.
Stocking.
And I can remember my mother always saying, Billy, this hurts me more than it does you. And you think of what it must hurt God to have to chastise us also.
True.
Because he loves us so much. And my
True.
mother loves me so much.
So, in a sense, all sickness, in the big picture thing, in the big scheme of things, the reason we have death and disease, if you look at the big picture, is because we individually and corporately have chosen to rebel against God. So we have entered rebellion into the equation.
Right.
And because of sin, there is going to be death. And that comes about because of our rebellious choices ultimately in the big picture. Now that doesn't mean the individual that's going through the suffering at that moment is a sinner per se. At that moment. Mark, you left. Okay. Well, I'll get him when he comes back. All right, we've got to move on. Dan, go ahead.